ओम तव कथामृतं तप्त जीवनम कविभिरीडितं कल्मषापहं श्रवणमंगलं श्रीमदाततं भुवि गृह्णन्ति ये भूरिदा जनाः. So we were discussing the first chapter of the second volume of the 5-volume English translation of the original Bengali Gospel. And in the previous class, Swami Vivekananda, who was singing a song, and Sri Ramakrishna goes into ecstasy hearing that beautiful song. After that, he sings one more song, which the meaning of which it goes like this: repeat the sweet name of the Lord with joy and gladness. Waves will rise on the sea of the nectar of his name. Drink it ceaselessly and give it to others. So the first two lines say that an ecstatic lover of God who is delighted to repeat his name, and that the repetition of the name itself to that devotee is like nectar. So he feels that waves of joy will rise as one goes on repeating the nectar of his name. Not only it gives the person who repeats the name joy, but it gives all the people around him who are within the circle of influence of his mind. This is a very subtle truth which those of you who have subscribed to the Vedanta magazine, we carry a two-part article in our March-April, in our in our May-June and March-April and May-June issues in two parts. It's a very big article on vibrations. The first part of the article is by Swami Ashokananda. And in the first part, which is about 10 pages, the second part will follow in the May-June issue, which will reach you within a few days, maybe 10 days. So we have published this article in two parts. In that, Swami Ashokanandaji very clearly shows the influence of vibrations. The vibrations are not just sound vibrations or vibrations of sound, light, and other physical vibrations. Mind, as you all know, we have discussed in great detail in Patanjali's Raj Yoga. Mind also has a tendency to constantly give out and take in subtle cosmic vibrations of the cosmic mind. The cosmic mind, which is a sum total of all the individual minds put together, and the individual minds include the minds of great prophets, the minds of great saints, both of the past, present, and the present. Those who are still living in the, maybe they are living in the physical body, or of the prophets of the past, whose minds continue to inspire human beings. They don't die because they are subtle. They live in a subtle existence for several centuries. That is why we see the influence of these great prophets, saints, in whose name people people remember, whose names they repeat the names. Say Rama, say Krishna, Ramakrishna, Chaitanya, Jesus. So all these great prophets whose lives and whose minds, though they no longer physically exist for most of us, but they remember these incarnations have the power to physically manifest themselves also, because they have power of over the Prakriti. We discussed that, how these, even the lesser gods, have the capacity to manifest itself through the subtle mind. So when waves of joy rise in a particular devotee or a particular worshipper of God, and he enjoys the name of God himself, it is like drinking something nectar himself or herself, and at the same time sharing it with others. How does it happen? As I told you, this article elaborately describes how the vibrations, subtle vibrations though they are, the more subtle they are, the more intense they are. And the more intense they are, they have a subtle influence, and they have a tendency to influence minds on the same wavelength. People who are struggling to try to repeat the name of God, they find, as it were, a strange help by these from these vibrations. And these vibrations are all around us. It's just a question of how we tune ourselves and receive the frequency. It is like a mobile tower. The tower signal may be very powerful, but if your device is not strong enough, no matter how powerful the signal may be, that the receiver, if it is weak, it cannot benefit. So also, even if the receiver is strong and the signal is weak, even then, even with the best equipment, you can't access those vibrations. So two things: one is the extensity of the vibrations and the intensity of the vibrations. So Swami Vivekananda once said, my master was as extensive as he was intensive. What he meant was, he was very deep. His mind was so powerful and so deep, but at the same time, it was extensive. It did not exclude anyone. His mind was all inclusive. So very rarely you find intensity of mind results in some kind of decrease in extensivity. Decrease in extensivity means they are very narrow sources of power. They are sources of power, but they are intensive, but not extensive. Only to a limited few they are accessible, which is true, because if you concentrate energy, the simple example would be focusing of the sun's energy through a lens. Now, if you hold a lens in front of the sun's rays, it focuses on a particular point and it burns. So the intensity increases. But the sun's rays, which fell upon a big area, are forced to fall upon a single point. So that is what the lens does. It focuses the scattered energy of the sun and focuses it at a particular point. So we know the intensity of the sun rays. They are very intense at some point, but they are not as intense in a point which is nearby. So extensivity is always sacrificed at the cost of intensivity. So if something becomes very intense, the force or power becomes intense, then that energy or that mind loses the capacity to influence many people. So that is why we find a lot of fanaticism. People tend to become very fanatic when it comes to religious or matters where they follow somebody. When you follow somebody, you follow some minds who are very intensive in nature. They are followers of a particular ideology, whether it is a political ideology or spiritual ideology or any material ideology. If the ideology is intensive, very strong, it has a tendency, it may have few followers, but they are very intense and they are very fanatical about the founder of that particular thought wave. So very often we see, with the best of intentions, all these prophets, when they when they tend to, the prophets and their disciples, especially the prophets themselves are very extensive, but the disciples have a tendency to limit that extensivity, and they spread the power. It, no doubt, it spreads very fast, but among limited circles, and you have to be inclusive, you have to be spiritually very limited, or maybe you are not all inclusive, you are exclusive. You follow certain people, certain ideologies, to the except I mean to the exclusion of all other ideologies. So you can't be liberal and fanatical at the same time. It is like having an intensity of a fanaticism with the liberality of a rational person. So these two very often do not coexist. But Swami Vivekananda says he was surprised to see that though Sri Ramakrishna was so broad minded and so extensive externally, and also internally. He had the broadest views, the broadest personality ever seen, because he accepted all. He accepted people who believed in idols, he accepted people who did not believe in idols, he accepted the formless God, he accepted the God with form, with image, without image. So whatever be the pursuit, his extensivity or his liberality was so much that he accepted all without exceptions, embracing in his life and message the entire humanity, not leaving out anybody, even the atheist. Atheists like uh, uh, Dr. Sarkar, who did not believe, though he was a Brahmo follower, he did not believe in, at least he did not believe in the God with form and images. But yet, because of his wonderful nature, Sri Ramakrishna attracted him and he loved him deeply. So, and he was amazed at the liberality. Even the Brahmos were exclusive, but he saw that this Sri Ramakrishna is so broad and intense. Though he is intense, he's so broad-minded that he embraces everybody, Brahmos, worshippers, Christians, Muslims, everybody who came to him. He accepted them and embraced them with open arms. So this extensivity, this all-inclusiveness, this broad-hearted nature very often results in believing in everything but not believing intensely in one particular thing. But in Sri Ramakrishna, Swami Vivekananda says, he was as broad as he was intense. His breadth of vision, his breadth of mind, his universal approach did not mean that he was not intense. When he became a Vaishnava, he was an intense Vaishnava, more intense than any Vaishnava. When he took to Tantra sadhana of Tantras, the different Tantras, he was as intense as any Tantric philosopher or sadhaka. When he followed a particular path of within Hinduism or outside of Hinduism, he intensely believed in the power of that religion to transform human personality. So that intensity helped him to realize God. His mind was so intense when he took up any object. He could take up any object or any subject at will and intensely focus on it and reveal its secret to the entire world. So you may say he became a Hindu, a Muslim, a Christian in turns. He followed almost all the different sects of different religions. And whenever he followed, he had the capacity to go intensely into that particular religion and get the highest realization offered by that particular religion or that particular sect within Hinduism. So this extensity combined with intensity was a rare phenomena which Narendranath was not able to explain, because in history he saw that people who are intensive, very often their followers make them they become rather fanatical and think that is the only way to truth. They don't accept others. Whereas Sri Ramakrishna was both intense and extensive. So that kind of mind, Swami Vivekananda was wonderstruck. How can a person believe in everything and at the same time become so intense in one particular subject or one particular sadhana? So he was wonderstruck, and that is why he was so much impressed by his master that he says, I am incompetent to even classify my master. That's why I call him Avtara Varishta, because such a manifestation of the mind, which was growing all the time, which was embracing everybody in the past, present, and even for the future, in the future. So Swami Vivekananda, getting inspiration from his master, said, God's book is not closed. As very often people believe that whatever is written in the books, within the books of my scripture, that describes God fully. But he says, Swami Vivekananda, taking inspiration from his master, he said, God's book is not closed. A few pages are the Vedas, a few pages are the Bible, the few pages are the Quran. So each page expresses a particular truth, or each scripture expresses a particular truth, but God's infinite book is never closed. It will be open, It was open in the past, it is open in the present, and it will be open in the future. To all the new ideas, to all the new thoughts, to all the new philosophies that human mind is capable of. And that was what Sri Ramakrishna represented to Swami Vivekananda. And it was that Sri Ramakrishna he preached in the West. And he knew it would be going against the principles of Sri Ramakrishna to say that Sri Ramakrishna's religion or the ideas preached by Sri Ramakrishna were limited. He believed in this only, or he believed in that only. No, he said life was like an open book. Whatever he followed with intensity, all he believed that a person who is sincere in whichever path he follows will reach the goal that that path promises to deliver. So those people, these waves of nectar, the repeating the holy name, whichever name, you see Sri Ramakrishna used to repeat the name so many gods and goddesses. Whenever he was in a particular mood, he used to go into samadhi. When he was singing this particular song, maybe it is a song composed by Brahmos, or maybe it is a song composed by the Vaishnavas. When he's singing about Hari, he would go into ecstasy, no matter which god we were worshipping. So he says, waves will rise in the nectar of his name, the waves of bliss. Drink it ceaselessly and give it to others. So this song, the poet says that don't be happy by enjoying the nectar of God's name yourself. Just share it with others. And he says, when your mind goes dry, which often happens in spiritual life, it is not that the sadhaka always enjoys the taste of God's name. Sometimes dry periods come to everybody. You feel we somehow fall into the illusory things of the world, the illusory ideas, the illusory thoughts, the illusory opinions, which may trouble us at the time being, but we know for certain that they are all empty words. They have really no meaning because there's no power behind it. Only the eternal values will survive. So he says, when your mind goes dry, the poet says, and Swamiji is singing this song, falling into illusory things of the world, sing his name and glory and fill it with the nectar of love. So whenever this dryness comes, periodically it will come. So all we have to do, according to this wonderful song, Naren says, and Thakur agrees, that you just have to fill the emptiness, the dryness that we feel after going after illusory things. Now and then we have to sing his name and glory and fill it with the nectar of love. That is what Sri Ramakrishna used to advise. First he said Nirjan was going into solitude now and then. Solitude can mean anywhere. In the mind, in the corner of your own room. One does not have to go to the forest always. So whether it is the forest, corner of your own room, or in a corner of your own mind, which is not the reactive mind, the mind which is not troubled by the reactions or the thoughts of others, which day and night are bombarded. We either hear, we see, we experience thoughts, the dumped thoughts. So one of the Western philosophers, when he was asked certain things, he said, no, I don't want to make my mind a garbage bin of the thoughts of others. I have enough positive thoughts of my mind or of whatever I believe to be true. I'm happy with those thoughts. Maybe those thoughts are little, but I just don't want to fill my mind, which is like a garbage bin. Very often we put a lot of garbage into it. So then it becomes difficult. The good things are covered. So the less contact we have, that's why nirjanvas or solitude is emphasized so much. Then only solitude will not help, because one has to have satsanga. So here one satsanga is going on where Naren is singing his name and glory. And we can get that satsanga by tuning ourselves to these wonderful vibrations, the name of the Lord, which always brings joy. Maybe slowly, but it will bring joy. That is why Holy Mother very often used to say, Japat Siddhi, Japat Siddhi. You just go on doing the name. The disciple very often said, "Oh, I feel dry. I don't feel I've made any progress." He said, "Just don't give up. Try for 10,000 or 15,000, at least 15,000 to 20,000 per day." These are her words. Have you tried? And even Swami Brahmananji said, if you practice for 10 to 15,000 times or 15 to 20,000 times every day, and then you don't see any result, then you don't find joy, come and slap me. That is what Swami Brahmananda claimed. So also Holy Mother used to say, sing his name and glory and fill it, but one has to fill it with the nectar of love. One has to repeat it lovingly. Just go to a quiet corner and just go on repeating. Take care. The next line says, the take care lest you forget that great mantra given by your guru. So very often we give so much importance to other things than the mantra itself, the holy name of the Lord. What is a mantra? It is any good name or holy name, either given by the Guru or by the Lord himself, the very popular names. It's not always necessary that one has to be initiated. Sometimes people like certain mantras, they repeat it. But one has to repeat it to get the advantage. One has to tune to its vibrations. Once you get tuned, the vibrations which the positive or the beneficial vibrations associated with that mantra will empower you, make you strong. Call upon the all compassionate Father in adversity. So naturally, one does not need to be told that in adversity we have to call upon the all compassionate Father. Why? Unless we think he is compassionate, unless we do it with so much love, how can we expect our problems to be solved? So very often the sadhaka begins and calls the God all compassionate. Of course, Swami Vivekananda once protested when he was suffering a lot, when he lost his father, when he lost so many things were going wrong in his life. He even scolded his friend. He said, don't say that God is compassionate. If God is compassionate, why these things are happening to me? Why can't he prevent it? That is very often the argument. So that is why, but that is in adversity, sometimes there is a tendency to lose faith. But the poet here, the great sadhaka here says, take care lest you forget that great mantra and call upon the all compassionate Father in adversity. If anything at all can help us out, adversity comes to everybody. But if anything helps us out of, takes us out of this adversity, it is the repetition of the great mantra or the holy name, which is to be repeated and filled with the nectar of love. That is one condition. That we have to love what we do. We have to do it not as a burden or something which we have to do only during adversity, but even in other times, if we do it with love, it comes very handy when you are in adversity. So the all compassionate Father or the Mother, whichever deity you worship, as a father or as a mother, has to be meditated upon as an all compassionate one. And every repetition of the name removes, as it were, a shackle, one shackle of that chain that binds us. And then he says, come shouting, victory to Brahman, and break the bonds of sin. So one has to be extremely energetic. This is what this line says. Unless we shout for so many things. We shout when there is some joyful music and so many things going on. People shout when there are musical notes and a lot of songs and so much funfair and all these things are happening. But we don't shout when we victory to Brahman, victory to Brahman. So that is what the Brahmos believed. They believed in the Saguna Brahman, the Brahman with qualities, who was compassionate, though they did not believe in form, but it's okay. So Thakur accepted that also, as long as you consider that formless God or the God with form. Whatever you accept, if he is the one whom you believe can break your sin, break the bondage of your sin, that attitude is more important. Which God you worship, with which mantra you worship is not important. So one has to be very energetic and believe with every repetition, and full of love and the nectar of love, and also with faith that it breaks the bondage of sin. So become a practitioner of the yoga of love, that is bhakti. Become intoxicated with the joy of Brahman and attain your goal. So here the poet is giving us a very easy path. And the kirtan is continuing with this last line. And as soon as Swamiji sings this last line, the musicians are playing the mridanga and the cymbals, and Narendra and other devotees are singing this kirtan. Normally, the kirtan, the last line of every paragraph, is sung in a chorus. He sings the first line, people repeat it. He sings the second line, people repeat it. So that is how the kirtan goes on. And as the intensity of singing increases, and as the people join more and more, they start getting the joy overwhelms the devotees, and they start singing and they start forming a circle around the singer normally, and they start. But in this case, it was Sri Krishna who was the center of attraction. Though Naren was singing and Sri Krishna was just listening, they all got absorbed by the wonderful ecstasy, the wonderful vibrations. See, it is not the singer alone, but there were some people in that group, all were devotees, especially Sri Krishna's powerful vibrations made them all get up and dance. It was a spontaneous feeling of joy which cannot be created artificially. It has to be experience. So that's why Turyananji said when he came to Dakshineshwar, when Thakur was not there, when Sri Krishna, he said, what a great mart of joy was there. Even Holy Mother remarked, we felt as if a mart of joy was in our heart. But the moment Sri Krishna left, Turyananji says, we could not feel the same joy. So it just doesn't depend on the singer alone. Though Narendra's singing was very soulful, but when Sri Krishna meditated on that song and sent very powerful, intense vibrations to all without exception, full of intensity but full of extensity as well. So whether he was a follower of God, follower of form, God with form or without form, he could feel that ecstasy, that joy, that love. So even the most confirmed atheist like Dr. Sarkar, even he in his old age, and even M sometimes, though he was a Brahmo and he never was given to all this singing, thinking it is very childish or maybe it is very uh, unbecoming of a mature person to dance. But even though they got inspired and they started dancing when Sri Krishna meditated and Naren sang. So it was a wonderful combination. Occasionally, they said Satyam Shivam Sundaram manifests itself in the temple of the heart. So it was sung in Bengali. Satyam means truth, Shivam means pure, Sundaram means beautiful. That which is true is pure and beautiful. And they always have a tendency, I mean, these qualities, when the heart gets purified, we don't say the mind gets purified. When you say the heart gets purified, it is the buddhi, because they say the seat of buddhi is the heart, not just the reactive mind. So at some stage of our life, we have to overcome the stage of the reactive mind and not get emotionally tossed up and down. Though it happens, it's easy to say that we should not be upset or get affected emotionally. We have to maintain our steady that uh, mind which is reactionary or reactive mind. When you do it, when a certain steadiness comes, and when such songs are sung as an impetus or one hears some such songs, then one opens oneself to vibrations which manifest in the temple of the heart, which is nothing but the buddhi, the mind, the higher faculty of the mind. But the normal feeling one gets is when the heart chakra, the center of the heart, not the physical heart, but the spiritual heart, where we are asked to meditate on our Ishta, on the deity whom we worship. So slowly the temple of the heart is as it were opened, and sitting on the lotus, our Ishta manifests or transmits that joy, and a little bit of it, if we are fit enough, is transmitted to the people around us. But that depends on how much of that deity we are manifesting in our own heart. If the manifestation is more like that of Sri Ram Krishna, at the slightest suggestion or at the slightest uh, singing of the name of the Lord in a beautiful tune by a person none other than Narendra, Sri Ram Krishna used to manifest that. And in the chorus, when they sang Satyam Shivam Sundaram, Satyam, the truth absolute, the purity absolute, the no trace of grossness, and Sundaram, the most beautiful. So the more subtle it is, the spiritual people try to see the beautiful in that. So at last, Narendra himself takes the coal. He is also now, after singing the song, and Sri Ram Krishna has infused some kind of joy and full of emotion, taking the coal, the drum. He sings with along. Then Thakur has also joined the chorus. Repeat the sweet name of the Lord with joy and gladness. Repeat the sweet name of the Lord with joy and gladness. So uh, this particular song, of course, it was in Bengali. I'm giving you the English translation. So this emotion, this flood of emotion was created by Sri Ramakrishna singing the song, and that forced Narendra himself to play the coal. He took the coal from the coal or the drum, the small coal with the small, it has a very different sound. Normally it is used in kirtan. So in the typical Vaishnava kirtans it is used. So they take the coal and dance. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu used to sing these songs in a group, Sankirtan. It is known as Kirtan in a group, the Sankirtan. So Harinam was sung and they used to play the khol, set it to rhythm and tune, and repeating the sweet name of the Lord with joy and gladness. They used to repeat again and again and again, shouting and jumping. And when the song ends, Sri Ramakrishna embraces Narendra a long time and says, "What a joy you have given me today." So today, Master says, a fountain of joy is welling up in Thakur's heart. It normally is there, but he doesn't express it. But today, because Naren has been singing and the song was so intense, it aroused the highest emotions. And the fountain of love started overflowing and infecting others who were around. And they also started, became intoxicated with that joy. It is about 8 in the evening. He's pacing the veranda alone, intoxicated. That is a typical characteristic of Sri Ramakrishna. Whenever he went into this high mood, lest that his mood will be disturbed by some worldly thought or some worldly person, he used to go into solitude and he used to pace up and down. Once, after the conversation and some kirtan, Master Mashe found in the dark, dim light of the temple courtyard, Sri Ramakrishna was pacing up and down with divine emotion. And he felt, it's got a strange feeling that Sri Ramakrishna is moving as if he's a lion. He liked lion normally walks alone. He likes loneliness. Loneliness, not loneliness. There's a huge difference between loneliness and solitude. So he sometimes, when he was in a very high mood, he used to get irritated at the slightest worldly thought. So to avoid that, he used to pace the veranda, long northern veranda, after and just get up from the crowd, and knowing fully well that once the song stops, people will again go back to their worldly ways. They'll start thinking about their family, about their wealth and other things. So that would create negative vibration. So Thakur used to wash, and Naren, Master Mashe saw him pacing, and he's pacing from one end of the veranda and not talking to other, and he's talking only with the Divine Mother. And he says, "What harm can you do to me? What harm can you do to me?" So nobody understood the significance. Why Sri Ramakrishna is saying, "What harm can do to me. So Narendra or M interprets it saying, Maya can do no harm. The Maya means the divine mother. Prakriti cannot harm one who has divine mother to protect him. So the lower aspect of Avidya Maya or the Avidya Maya cannot disturb or distract one who has the divine Maya or the Vidya Maya to protect him. Is that what he is saying? That is the master's interpretation. So he seems to be saying on behalf of the entire humanity that what harm can you do to me? I am protected by the Vidya Maya, so Avidya Maya cannot touch me. So that is the feeling Sri Ramakrishna inculcates in others as he is pacing up and down the veranda. So Narendra M and Priyanath are going to spend the night there. So they had decided, maybe the next day was holiday. So they wanted to enjoy the holy company of Sri Ramakrishna. And Sri Ramakrishna is beside himself with joy that Narendra will stay. He often loved the company of pure souled people, pure minded, pure hearted people like Premananda. And he used to very often ask them because he knew that in their company, the divine emotions spontaneously welled up in his heart. So now he is very happy because wonderful people like Narendra M and Priyanath are staying there, have decided to stay there. Supper is ready. Holy Mother is in the Nahabat. Nahabat is the small place, very small place, 8 feet by 8 feet perhaps in width, where Holy Mother's whole house, her cooking, kitchen, everything in one room, she used to do everything. And on the top floor of the Nahabat, Thakur's mother, Sri Ramakrishna's mother, used to stay. So in that very small space, which was hardly enough for a person to live, in that place she used to stay, she used to take rest, she used to meditate, she used to cook. Hardly 8 by 8 feet in size. It's a hexagonal room if you go and see. You don't have much time, much space to even walk. It is such a small room. You can hardly stretch yourself there. 8 feet means it's so less. But anyway, in that small house with that minimal arrangement, that Nahabat, normally it is meant for singing or playing. Nahabat is a place where people play the shehnai, a winded type of flute instrument. It is known as shehnai, Indian flute. And that was played early in the morning, normally from the first floor of the Nahabat, but it was not used for that purpose anymore. And it was given for Holy Mother because it was very near the temple. And she had access to Sri Ramakrishna's room and cook the food and keep all her stores hanging there in that Nahabat. So Holy Mother had prepared chapatis, that is Indian bread, with gram, lentils, and other things, curry, which Naren liked. She has sent for disciples to come and eat their supper. The disciples stay here off and on, and Surendra bears the expenses every month. Surendra was the one person who supported Sri Ramakrishna. Even when he was in Dakshineshwar, he used to send a small contribution. And because of his purity, Sri Ramakrishna used to accept his gift. Many rich people had offered, including the Narayan Marwadi, who wanted to offer 10,000 rupees, which was a huge amount in those days. But Thakur refused during his sadhana days. But there were some pure soul devotees whose small contributions supported, and because there were a lot of expenses, very often people used to come and stay. So Holy Mother cooked for all of them without any reserve, and people like Narendra M and all used to stay. So they used to also contribute. The householders used to contribute. The veranda to the southeast of Sri Ramakrishna's room is being made ready for eating. So that is the place. They could not obviously stay, eat in the Nahabat. So they used to eat, and Narendra and all the others who are going to stay there naturally would be offered food, supper there. So Narendra and others are forbidden to talk of the school or any such matter. Now Sri Ramakrishna had made certain rules for his devotees. So Narendra and others stand as they stand at the eastern door of the room, Thakur's room, and the veranda will be used for eating supper. Then Narendra says, Narendra and M are talking to each other. So Narendra now has become transformed by the touch of Sri Ramakrishna. So he says, don't you see what the boys of today have become? They are not bad, but absolutely no religious instruction is given to them. My observation, M says they are not bad. I mean, M was a principal and a teacher himself, so he knew, and he blamed everything because the system of education in those days prohibited. It was a sort of first time in India this idea of secular education was brought by Macaulay's decree. So he practically, they took charge of the education system, and to avoid, they thought religious things should not be given. So religious thought should not be given to children. They should choose themselves. They are not bad, M says, but no religious instruction is given to them. And as a result, perhaps he implies that they are not behaving well. But Narendra says, my observation is their behavior is going downhill. They are flippant and vulgar. They show off and play truant. I have even seen them visiting places of ill repute. So Naren had a different experience because he went to the college in those days and he was not very happy the way things were going and how people, youths were increasingly falling a prey to this flippant and vulgar things, and often visiting places where they were not supposed to. So M says, when I was a student, I never heard or saw such things. So M belonged to an earlier generation. So some kind of religion and some kind of morality was taught in the school. So he says, I never heard or saw such things. Then Narendra says, you apparently did not keep company with such boys. I have seen them call other people vulgar names. Who knows what people they might be meeting in their life. So he knew the effects of evil company would spoil people. M says it is strange because in his personally in his school perhaps there were, he did not keep company with such people. So he tended to disagree. But then Naren was giving, Naren being younger to him, was talking of the present generation, his generation. Narendra says, I know many whose character has been lost. I wish the school authorities and their guardians had kept an eye on them. So then Sri Ramakrishna, as soon as they converse, Sri Ramakrishna comes from the room. Now this conversation apparently between Narendra and M was very important. They were describing the social situation, but even that was not accepted uh, by Sri Ramakrishna. You see how his method of reforming people, he was never negative in his approach. So as they converse, Sri Ramakrishna comes to the room and he wants to hear what they were discussing. And he says, I say you, what are you people talking about? So he was just curious. What are these two devotees whom Thakur loved so much talking about? So they were discussing social matters. So Narendra was very frank. So he says, we are talking about the school. The boys are today are losing their character. Sri Ramakrishna listens for a while what they want to say and then says to M gravely, this is very important. He says, it is not good to talk about these things. You see what a different way of approaching. We people often fall into this trap and start criticizing everybody and anybody. And we don't realize, as Holy Mother said, how much harm it causes us. It doesn't cause any harm to those people about whom we are talking, but it spells doom for us. And M realized this tendency, and he did not want Naren to fall a prey to this, and especially M. So indirectly he's telling M very gravely. He was just in a very good mood, but suddenly he expresses his displeasure, says, it is not good to talk about these things. No talk is right except the talk about the Lord. So he was very positive in his approach. He was absolutely clear in this that we do not solve problems by becoming or part of the problem or discussing about the problem. The problem may be there. It is a statement of fact that these things are happening around us. But do we do anything positive, contribute anything positive by becoming part of the problem? Sri Ramakrishna always believed in becoming the part of the solution rather than the problem. And he gathered around him. He expected the people around him, not all. That is why he was very careful about what he taught Narendra. And he admonished him in front of him and all of them, saying that you are our special people, you are my special people, the chosen people. So they were all belonging to the inner circle. If you set an example by discussing this silly things, which, and he says no talk is right except talk about the Lord. If you can't do that, he used to tell Latu Maharaj, at least don't gossip, but at least go and sleep. You are older than he and you are intelligent. Means he is trying to point out Naren's defect without directly talking to him. He says you are older to him. You should not be talking all these things. Look at your age. You are almost have 1 foot in the grave. And you are indulging in such kind of talk. Your time is less. They are young people, but you are showing them the wrong. You are older than he and you are intelligent. So you should not be doing this and setting a bad example for Narendra. So that is how Sri Ramakrishna taught his disciples. You should not have allowed him to raise such topics. Narendra is around 19 to 20 and M is not very old, he is just 28. But Sri Ramakrishna, looking at his seniority and his maturity, because he is a teacher, but M has very honestly recorded that no devotee would, no devotee or no one who records such admonitions will record these things. M is embarrassed. So he is very honest. That's why gospel is of such wonderful value. He is very honest about everything that Thakur said, even if the target was he himself. So he is embarrassed and Narendra and other devotees keep quiet. Sri Ramakrishna smiles as he stands. Once having nipped this tendency to gossip in the bud, Sri Ramakrishna now smiles. He knows that this will have an effect on Narendra. And because he is intelligent, because M is intelligent, in future, they will never discuss these things, even in my absence. So in his presence, it was not possible. But even in his absence, Sri Ramakrishna ensured that the discussions will not take place. So Sri Ramakrishna smiles as he stands and feeds Narendra and others. He is very happy because such a wonderful mood has been created. And suddenly, when they go out, they talk about the situation in the world. That is what happens in most of our cases. We enjoy satsanga, we enjoy all the wonderful spiritual talk, and also when we read, we feel elated. But suddenly, as it were, when we expose ourselves to the negative thoughts around us, the mind has a tendency. And Sri Ramakrishna was very particular that at least the inner circle, the disciples whom he considered to close to him, whom he wanted to be the standard, whom he wanted to set a standard for other people, they should not at least do these things. He was not bothered what the boys are doing because there is very little that one can do. The only contribution we can make is to repeat the Lord's name and, as Swamiji said, manifest the divinity within, and you will see everything around you will be harmonious. So if we want, we have to struggle hard. The harder we struggle to realize the divinity within, you will see that the divinity outside you, slowly, it is a gradual process because we have to undo what we did for years together. Nature and Prakriti is always, Avidya Maya is always inspiring us in a negative way, asking us to look around for faults. It has become a chronic disease with us. So to offset the uh, problems created by that, Sri Ramakrishna is catching hold of some close devotees who are always positive, who don't, including M, he was not even hesitating to record something in this conversation where he was himself admonished. People would normally like to say good things about them, where they have been praised, how they have been loved by these great people. But people never write these things where they have been admonished. So, having taken their meal, Naren and other devotees go to Thakur's room. So we will now conclude and answer a few questions. And then he is trying to create a positive vibration. And Thakur says to Narendra, please sing that song. The full moon of divine love rises on the firmament of divine wisdom. So Narendra begins to sing. So in a very tactful way, he is converting the negative atmosphere which would have been created as a result of discussion, social discussion, to into a divine mood which he knew has been created and it has to be sustained. So Naren, once he starts singing, then the whole negative atmosphere goes away, vibrations, and a positive atmosphere is created. So we will come to the questions now. Let us see if there are some questions in the chat. Yeah. So the first question is, how can we assure somebody who has lost faith in God in times of adversity not to lose faith in the all compassionate one? You see, the question is whether we lose faith in God. It's not a question of convincing others. As Sri Ramakrishna very clearly says, he's pointing out to this very question. He says, why do you bother that the boys are not becoming vulgar and this is happening in society, that is happening in society? Indirectly, he seems to be saying, why are you bothered? You focus on your positivity. Because if you discuss negative things, you are becoming part of the problem. You are sending these negative vibrations around you, though it may not affect the good people, but at least the people who are vulnerable, they will be affected by your negativity. And that lack of faith in God, which you observe in them, and if you go to point it out to them, then instead of having a positive impact, it will have a negative impact. That is why very often we see parents coaxing their children to have faith in God. They say, why should I? I mean, they expect you to have faith in God. And in types of adversity, how you are solving your problem by going to the Lord and just not trying to criticize or solve it using human methods. So when we go to God in times of adversity, it is more likely that the people around us will follow that example. When they see you succeeding, or even if they see you attempting, every time when you pray, you can't expect adversity to go away so easily. But one has to have a lot of patience. But a person who has patience and does that, he doesn't have to convince others that you should have faith during adversity. When he sees you have faith, he will automatically follow. So it is better to uh, make them follow. If at all your wish is our wish is that, make them follow by our own example rather than by telling them. By telling, very often the negative effect is felt unless it is very sincere. When Sri Ramakrishna used to say, and that also he was very careful, he is pointing out to Narendra, and by telling M, he is indirectly giving him a message that you should not be doing that. Rather than that, you sing some songs, you have come here, experience the love of God, and then you see all your problems will vanish. He also had his own share of problems, adversities. The worst adversities which a young man can hope to experience in life. He had that. He was criticized by people, uh, and because of jealous people. Jealous people have the tendency to criticize others. He was criticized. He was criticized. He lost his father. So many adversities came at a time, which almost made him lose faith in God. But still, he held on to that faith. And seeing him now, innumerable people, seeing the devotion of Narendra, seeing him face the adversities, and seeing him go through it through with patience, they get inspired. So we should be not that we have to tell everybody who has got adversities in life to pray to God. If we ourselves pray, they will be inspired sooner or later. Yes. Yes, Maharaj. Out of many rags, that is, songs do most practice than others, that rag or song gradually becomes more lovable than others. That is the answer, possibly. No. Ragas have, though they say, when Swamiji sang, he gave a lot of importance to raga. But Sri Ramakrishna once corrected him and he said raga and rhythm are important, but raga and tala. Tala is the rhythm, raga is the tune. But overemphasis should not be given. It is the bhava that makes the song complete. First is the spiritual content of the song. So Swami Vivekananda in the initial stages, because he was a good musician, he thought singing a song with perfect raga and tala. But he saw there are so many characters, evil characters, who can be very good singers, but they don't have the least bit of spirituality in them. They are good singers, no doubt. Due to intense practice, they are perfect in raga and tala. So there is no particular raga and tala, though it may help. It may help, as Sri Ramakrishna said, if you have the right bhava. But our great devotional songs normally were sung where the raga matched the bhava. See, for example, in the evening, the prayers, Khandana is sung in Yaman Kalyan. So it is a raga which induces good vibrations in the evening. So it is known as an evening raga. But just because you sing Yaman beautifully doesn't make you a spiritual person. If you sing that song, if you sing Khandana, Bhava Bandhana, that beautiful song which Swami Vivekananda himself composed and set to tune in Chautal, he composed this song, he set the music, he set the tune, but at the same time, see the deep meaning. So if you combine the bhava, the ideas behind that song, combine it with that particular song which is sung in the evening and sing it at the right time. They say each raga has enhances the devotional mood in that particular time of the day. So in a way that is true, but not without bhava. So that is the idea. Now the last question is, uh, Maharaj, you mentioned that heart related to buddhi and mind related to manas. Could you please elaborate in the context of chitta shuddhi? So chitta shuddhi, chitta is the whole mind. The whole mind stuff in Patanjali's yoga is known as chitta. Chitta means sum total of all your thoughts, manifest and unmanifest. It includes the seed thoughts in seed form, which have not sprouted to become thoughts. They are samskaras. So everything is chitta. So when you talk of chitta shuddhi, it really means shuddhi of the manas, the reactive mind. So all we have to do is clean the reactive mind. Buddhi doesn't have to be cleaned. The buddhi automatically, buddhi is the cleaned part of the mind. So that is the relationship. So in the context of chitta shuddhi, when you say chitta shuddhi, it means cleaning the unconscious and the conscious thoughts. It's not just the conscious thoughts that have to be cleaned. Your samskaras are there. The bad samskaras inherited or because of wrong thinking in the past. We have to undo that. So chitta shuddhi involves that also. So all the thoughts, manifest or unmanifest in the mind stuff, is known as chitta. So the whole mind stuff, good and bad, which includes the reactive mind, but in that chitta, the manas part is dominating now. So the buddhi part is that part, or buddhi is the refined mind, which is a result of destruction of samskaras of the reactive mind or manas or the samskaras. So chitta becomes, as it becomes shuddha, it becomes pure. The buddhi has a tendency to manifest more and more, and that gives rise to a chitta shuddhi, and that results in intuition, the intuitive power of human mind. And mind becomes not only powerful, but it becomes, the more pure the mind, the more powerful, the more concentrated, and the more peaceful, the more joyful the mind is. So a chitta shuddha, I mean after chitta shuddhi, the content of the reactive mind becomes less and less. Buddhi becomes sharper and sharper. The Vidya Maya becomes more. The divinity starts expressing more and more. You become more subtle, and you become uh, more and more spiritually evolved. That is the idea. So I think there are no more questions, and we will take leave now. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.